Is this thing on?
Are you ready, Matt?
You're listening to Box Office Bingers with Matt Diaz and Ernesto Santos.
Good evening, folks. We have a wonderful evening's entertainment lined up for you.
We know each other. He's a friend from work.
Box Office Bingers.
And the only way that I know how to do it is to find you a bloody good dump.
He's my friend. I don't have friends. I got family.
I can do this all day.
You know, if you put your mind to it, you can accomplish anything.
And we're back for another episode of Box Office Vendors. Matthew, I am so excited to continue our Barbenheimer double feature, our review of Barbie we just completed. And now we are reviewing Oppenheimer. Give us the deets and let them know what special guests we have this week.
Yeah, so this week we're doing Barbenheimer Part 2. Of course, we are reviewing Oppenheimer, written and directed by the visionary Christopher Nolan. Backed by an all-star cast. I don't think this movie... That's right. It is an understatement. I don't think there has been a cast or a cast as stacked as this one in a Nolan film. I had to get that one out there. Cillian Murphy, Robert Downey Jr., Matt Damon, Emily Blunt, Florence Pugh, Dan DeHaan, Jason Clarke, Alden Ehrenreich, and Ehrenreich. See, thank you, Brian. Let's bring him in. We also have special guest, Brian.
Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Brian. This, again, keeping me straight because I am the worst at pronouncing names. But Brian, welcome to the show. How are you?
Doing great. Doing fantastic. Happy to be back. Sorry I spoiled my own entrance, but
you come in however you want to come in.
But yeah,
yeah,
excited to be here.
This is its own ship. We're just riding its wave. But yeah, for those who don't know who Christopher Nolan is, first of all, if you really don't know who Christopher Nolan is, go back. It's been a couple of years now, but we did our creator spotlight on Christopher Nolan, where we did a deep dive on 3 of his films, which was, I believe, The Prestige, Inception, and Interstellar, as well as getting a background of his early beginnings, some of his work, a couple of deep dives on those films, as well as his future work, which I believe at the time we were talking about that he was doing Tenet. That was the Tenet, right? And then he's also probably most popularly known as the director behind the Dark Knight trilogy, Batman Begins, The Dark Knight, and The Dark Knight Rises. So, needless to say that we are all Christopher Nolan fans for sure. Now we're going to be talking about Oppenheimer, potentially one of his, well, The Dark Knight is, but outside of the Batman movies, one of his biggest movies.
It's definitely
that he's done so far. I mean, that's up for debate, and we'll probably dive into that a little bit later. But before that, gentlemen, what a joy it was to actually see this particular movie that we are reviewing today with both of you. I believe this is the first time in many years that we've been doing this podcast that we have not only have Ernesto and I saw a movie together, but also we saw a movie together with the guests that were also coming on the show. It's all there. It's all explosive. Once before, when we reviewed Star Wars Rise of Skywalker, we had Juan and Kirk on the show, and we also went to go see the movie with them. Actually, we literally went to my house right after the movie was over, and we recorded the episode.
That was a hot take.
Thoughts were fresh. Right off the dome.
Yeah, that was very fresh. Yeah. But yeah, let's. But before we kind of continue with the show, like, Brian, this is obviously a movie theater experience, and I think we can also say that we kind of got one based on the Barbenheimer weekend that was kind of involved. How did you feel like your movie experience was as opposed to maybe say The Little Mermaid the last time we spoke with you, like we had you on the show? Like, I'm sure there were different experiences or vibes that we were getting this weekend in particular.
Yeah, so you guys did. I was grateful that you guys picked an IMAX showing, so we did get to see it on kind of that larger screen and have that full experience, even if it wasn't the 70 millimeter IMAX that Nolan would like us to see it in. But it was just really refreshing to see so many people at the theater. And as you guys saw, like there was just a sea of pink of people coming to see Barbie, and there was just a lot of energy and buzz. The lobby was super full of people, like getting concessions. I learned about Ernesto's snacking habits during movies. He likes to pour the little jalapeno juice all over his popcorn, which I thought was quite interesting. Maybe worth a try someday.
You should have told me.
But there was just there was barely. I don't remember seeing an open seat in our theater. We had a noon showing on Saturday, release weekend, and it was obviously totally different than taking my kids to see Little Mermaid, which was still like, fun, enjoyable, but very different atmosphere. I would say the theater was definitely not as full, even though it was relatively full because there were people taking their families to see Little Mermaid. But it was good to see a movie like this on the big screen because that's obviously how it was intended and how it was made with that experience in mind. So yeah, I had a fantastic time, and the company was great. It was great to go with you guys. Like I said, I was like, if we're gonna do this pod, we should go see this movie together. I feel like it could add a little something extra to the
it absolutely did. Like it was a great experience. It was nice to. First of all, it was nice to see you again, sir. I don't even know how many years it's been since I've physically been able to see you. It's been
definitely before COVID. Probably was the last time.
Many months ago. And God, the theaters were just so packed. I mean, our theater was so packed that literally you don't remember that girl right at the beginning of the theater, like where the AMC team member had to come in and kick that guy out, and then the guy she was with didn't even say anything. He just let it happen. Right? Was I the only one who saw that? I was like, is this really happening?
No, I saw the same thing. I was like, wait a minute. So is she with her boyfriend, her partner, whoever? She was with somebody. And this guy was like, I don't know who this guy is sitting next to me. I know this is your seat, babe, but Oppenheimer's starting right now. And so you're going to have to figure it out. That's the vibe that I got.
I wasn't entirely sure what was happening there, but I was like, everyone needs to get out of my way because there were people walking in front as the movie was starting, and I was like, you are not about to ruin this for me. But yeah, the fact that there was actually a movie theater employee inside the theater handling a patron escalation, I was like, movies are back. Movies are back.
That's a really good point.
The fact that you make an excellent point, because any other movie that I've seen the last few years, it's like, oh, someone's in my seat. Well, I guess I'll just move to the next one then, because there's not a lot of people in this theater. But you can't say that. It's like all of us booked our tickets in advance because we knew how packed it was going to be. I'm not going to go sit in the front because someone's in my seat. No, I'm going to kick him out. And the fact that person, I mean, kind of shame on the person who knew he wasn't supposed to be sitting there. Like, he just like, oh, I'm just going to ride it out and see what happens. Because you had to get to it. They went all the way to an attendant to tell them to get out because you didn't know how to read your phone. I don't know. I feel like he knew he was in the wrong there. But yeah, a crazy experience that I, first of all, was not expecting going to see into this movie. But also just what I haven't seen in so long.
He's right. That's an indication that the movies are back. I mean, and we know how many kids we saw dressed up as Barbies, and I was like, I don't know. You're gonna find out that that's probably not the movie you should be taking your kid to go see.
If you want to hear our thoughts on Barbie, you can go listen to Barbenheimer Part 1 that we recorded on our previous episode. But this one, of course, this is Barbenheimer Part 2. We're going to be focusing all on Oppenheimer and all of its glory. But before we get into that, we're going to do something we did not do last week, which was do a fun segment we like to call Whatcha Watchin'. Brian, we had talked about this. Literally, we were talking about the things that we were watching in the front of the movie theater like we did back in the olden days, and maybe even the inspiration of how this podcast came to be, because all of this podcast is just talking about the things that we watched. And
exactly.
So Brian, we'll start with you. What have you been watching, sir?
I would say I have been watching a lot of new stuff. The only thing I finished it. My wife and I watched The Bear season 2,
Man.
which I can't say enough good things about. It is tremendous. I don't know if either of you have gotten around to watching it, but it is. I think I was texting with Ernesto the other day. It's on its way to becoming like a Pantheon show. It is so good. And it just brings me so much joy. It's so pleasurable to watch. Talk about people that just show up that you don't expect, as in Oppenheimer. That's the entirety of The Bear season 2. There are a lot of really wonderful guest stars, and it's just so refreshing to have something original and exciting and emotionally engaging and visually interesting, and it tries to take risks and do something slightly different each episode, especially in the second season. I loved it. I loved it so much, and it's going to be a while probably before we get the next season, but it's one of my favorite shows of the last several years for sure. I loved season 1, but I feel like season 2 definitely took things to another level.
Okay.
So 5 stars, full 5-star recommendation from myself.
Wow.
Brian, So to get to Ernesto to give a tease, I've also watched the entirety of season 2 of The Bear, and
I have to wait for my wife.
And I pretty much agree with everything Brian said. Like he said it very well. It is probably one of the best seasons of television I've seen in a long time. It is so good. Like, to Brian's point, season 1 was good. Season 2...
Very, very good.
Yeah, season 1, very, very good. Season 2, though, it just takes it to another level. It's like... it's just a different show.
Man.
It's not the same as season 1. It's Ernesto. It's not the same show. I feel like if the first season was like the chaos of a kitchen, and like the stresses that it can be, how it can affect your mental health. I feel like now it's like season 2 is like, how do we build a business? Like, what are the steps to take to do that? How do we build a restaurant? How do we make ourselves a better person? How do we find what we're looking for without not knowing what we're looking for? It's brilliant. It's amazing.
To put it very simply, and this is just like, maybe I wouldn't call it reductive, but it's just like, to me, it's just very simply about the messiness of life in a way that is just like so moving. I'm gonna like start crying. It's just like, it's such a good show. I can't say enough good things about it. It's beautiful and riveting. Like, I'm ready to start the whole thing over from the beginning.
Brian, question for you: when you was working in food service as we did, what do you think, did you find the relation between like working in food service and watching the second season?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely more with the first season, just because there's a lot more of that, like, being on the line, being, the service is very stressful, and that part was super relatable, like all of those scenes of like being stressed with like restaurant service. But there's a little bit less of that in the second season. Like Matt said, it's kind of more about getting the new restaurant open and more about the barriers and the challenges to like opening a new business. And so less of those specifically relatable moments. But yeah, it's great. I love it so much. And then the other things I think I've been watching, let's see. I watched Mission Impossible 5, Rogue Nation, which I'd seen, but I was rewatching. And I actually had never gotten all the way through Fallout, just one of those kind of perils of having children. Like I got it on digital, probably watched 45 minutes of it, never went back to it, just never found the time. And then I was like, I need to like fire it up and go all the way through, and it's so good. Fallout rocks. Yeah. So I'm glad I got through that, and now I'm actually gone back to some of the earlier ones that I haven't seen in a really long time. And then, like I said, not a whole lot new. other than the bear. But my daughter is discovering Harry Potter for the first time.
Oh.
So she's only 6. So she has tried to plow through the movies, and she was with it up until about the 6th movie. And then it just is a little too complex for her plot-wise, I think. So I wouldn't say she's losing interest, but it doesn't hold her interest as much because she's like asking a lot of questions, trying to figure out like what's going on. Mm-hmm. But it's been kind of pleasurable to go back and watch them. I've obviously watched them a million times growing up with them. But man, that 3rd movie is so good. The Alfonso Cuarón movie. And honestly, I think 6 is one of the best ones as well. So it's been fun to rewatch those and just remember the highs and lows of that experience. I will eventually I think we're going to go back and start rewatching the movies from the beginning and like also get the books in there and some of the illustrated versions of the books and kind of enhance the experience. So that's been fun. I don't know if we're ever going to touch on the Fantastic Beasts movies. We'll see how interested she is when we're actually finished with the, series proper. Those movies are a real mixed bag. So
I was gonna ask,
but it's been really cool to go back and be like, oh man, Prisoner of Azkaban, and that movie is almost 20 years old next year. 20 years old.
Wow.
Yeah.
Make us feel old now.
Yeah. So that's been a good time. There's a bunch of stuff I'm interested in watching. I was a huge Justified fan, so I'm really looking forward to starting the new series. I haven't gotten around to it yet, but there's only been a couple episodes, so. But yeah, I was all in on Justified. I like binged it, watched it, that was one of those shows I was staying up till like 3 a.m. to finish in time to watch the last 2 seasons live. So, yeah, really excited for that. But I haven't dove in yet, but, that's pretty much it for me for what I've been up to.
Okay.
Well, Ernesto? I don't have much, obviously, because me and my wife are still plowing through Yellowstone.
When it came to your screen and it's like, what you watching? In my head, it's like, okay, so he's probably still binging Yellowstone. And I look down and I see that you're wearing the shirt. I just noticed that. That's hilarious. So you're a fan. Yes. I can tell.
I mean, it's good. Brian, I don't know if we've talked about it before, but have you seen Yellowstone?
We talked about it a little on the last show I was on. I'm familiar with the broad strokes of it because like my mom watches it, and I just keeping up with TV. Like I know that it's in this limbo with the last season, and they're gonna have like the spinoff sequel, and then they have the other 2 spinoffs, and Taylor Sheridan basically just cranks them out for Paramount Plus. Not just Yellowstone, but all the other shows. We talked about that the last time, but I haven't actually watched any of Yellowstone yet. It's on the list.
I guess we're almost done. So I think the next thing is going to be whether we watch the series finale of Barry or if we watch season 2 of The Bear. It's like those are our next 2, or either, and also this last season of Black Mirror. Those are the 3 shows that we're pending to watch together. So all the ones that I really want to watch, I am waiting for my other half, which is, it is what it is. That's what it is. It'd be like that sometimes. But
yeah,
I feel like that you don't have either one of those decisions on a wrong decision. Like I heard a lot of good things about the Black Mirror's latest season. I heard people loved about Barry, and we were just raving about the Bear. So yeah, I can. I
guess either way, it's gonna be. Either way, it's gonna be an enjoyable experience. But the one other thing I have been watching is because it was nominated is Welcome to Chippendales, the Kumail Nanjiani, Matt Shackman show.
Oh wow, yeah,
that is really good. It's very good. It's there's a lot of nudity. There's a lot of that. It's about them opening his character opening Chippendales and kind of just like all the crazy shit that happens surrounding it. It's just like one of those wild wild stories. Like in the first episode, he gets this guy to help him promote the club, and then he gets jealous of the people who he brought in, so that he goes home and kills his wife and blows his head and kills himself. And that's how the first episode ends. So it's like strap in.
Jesus.
But it's great. Kumail, I can see. If I remember what he's nominated for his acting in that. It's nominated for something, but I could see him being his nomination being warranted. He's very good. His role's very good. The cinematography's fine. Like the writing is really good, and that's really what keeps me interested. And it's Matt Shakman, isn't that? That's the guy who did WandaVision, isn't it?
Yeah, is he directing?
I believe so. He was involved in WandaVision. Was he I think he was one of the main primary directors.
Yeah, Matt Shakman directed the first 2 episodes of Welcome to Chippendales. Yep. He's not credited as a creator, but he's a director.
But yeah, it's been great. It's been a good show. That's all I have, man. I haven't really had much, especially because I wanted it right before I go on vacation. I wanted to make sure I got our Barbenheimer in.
Yes. Yeah, I'm just looking at Chippendales. It has 5 Emmy nominations. Leading actor for Kumail Nanjiani, supporting actor, supporting actress, 2 supporting actresses, and outstanding period costumes for a limited and anthology series or movie. So yeah, there you go. So yeah, as I mentioned earlier, I've also binged the entire 2nd season of The Bear. And I was just sharing the same sentiment as Brian. I watched it in 2 days because I couldn't put it down of how great it was. And I just wanted to just highlight the 2 episodes. One was episode 6, which was the hour-long episode, Brian. That was like the cameo galore, so to speak. Yeah. It was the feast of the season. I was like, what? Yeah. You and you and I know you too. And it's just like, wow, it's that to me that was just such a gripping episode. But episode 7, Forks, was the one that got me. That's the one that made me cry. I was like, wow, it's just incredible what they did with that character, what it meant, and like I felt like you felt it when he felt it. Like, I don't want to give anything away, but you know what I'm talking about. Like when the scene was kind of going about, you realized the magic, the spark that he was searching for, and you also felt that as well. And I thought that episode, for me, was among my favorites. It was such a beautiful episode to me. Ernesto, I can't recommend The Bear season 2 enough. It's, again, one of the best seasons of television I've seen in a while. And I know a lot of people raved about Succession, and I didn't see that. And a lot of people were saying that that's a great season of television, but I can't speak to Succession, but I can speak to The Bear for right now.
It's really special, Ernesto. You're gonna have a good time when you finally get around to watching it.
Yeah,
season 1 was great, really great.
And you recommended me season 1, so I thank you, Ernesto, because I wouldn't think I would have watched it unless you recommended season 1.
Another one I got you for.
Yeah. Yeah, I know, right? I also saw No Hard Feelings, the movie that you and Nick De Lorenzo talked about a few movies back, and I found it really enjoyable. I mean, to me, I thought that's the hidden gem of the summer, to be honest with you. It's just like it's like not a movie that I was expecting, not a movie that it deserved to be any funnier than it is. It's kind of a silly premise, but it somehow it works. It works for the movie. Jennifer Lawrence should do more comedies. It's like I was looking down her repertoire, and it was just like, okay, it's Hunger Games and drama and drama and drama, and then this one's kind of like a dramedy, and then all of a sudden she takes this out, and it's like a complete 180 from anything she's ever done. And that's like, she's a comedian. Right? She needs to do more of that.
I haven't seen the movie. I have heard really good things about it. But I do love her in general, but her career has just been, like Matt basically just said, it's kind of like one choice after another where you're just like, okay, are we just kind of in this like Oscar space working with like really good filmmakers, but like not really being 100% right for these parts? Like, they figured out, it seems like, with that movie to really play to her strengths. And like, she is like a goofy and funny and like self-effacing person in real life. So it just seems like a natural fit for her to just go full comedy. And that seems like her thing that she like, you know, really I feel like she should gravitate more towards that going forward, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. Because even looking at her repertoire, I mean, you talked about like obviously she did the Hunger Games movies, and then as far as her Oscar contention, she did Silver Linings Playbook, American Hustle, she did Joy, and what's the other one? And I think that was and Don't Look Up. All those movies were regarded as, you know, Oscar contenders in one way, shape, or form. And then she's also played Mystique in the X-Men films, so like kind of also not a comedic role. And then she did Passengers with Chris Pratt that a lot of people forgot. And then she did the horror movie Mother and the what is this, the drama thriller Red Sparrow. So yeah, to your point, her career and Causeway, the movie we talked about last year.
That was a good movie.
The
best thing about that movie was Brian Tyree Henry, and that was an Apple original movie, in which he was nominated for. Like, the movie was okay. It was great.
Yeah, he was good. But this one, very refreshing to see her kind of go into the. It's kind of like this character fits her personality, as I've seen her in interviews and reacts and stuff like that. So yeah, no hard feelings. Definitely recommend that. And also just a breakout role for what's his name, Andrew Barth Fieldman. He hasn't been in much anything, and he went toe to toe with Jennifer Lawrence really well. Like I said, weird premise, but it works. It's a really good time. I enjoyed, as I suspected, this movie more than I did Joyride, which was a movie. Do you know
his origin story, Andrew Barth Feldman?
No,
so he hasn't really done a lot of film or TV that I'm aware of. This is probably his first big film project. But he was actually the only teenager that was actually in high school that played Dear Evan Hansen on Broadway.
Wow.
He was actually 17 or 18, maybe even younger, maybe even 16. But yeah, he was basically plucked right out of high school. I think he was still in high school while he was doing the show.
He did Catch Me If You Can.
This guy has a voice then.
If You Can.
Yeah.
Dear Hansen on Broadway. SW, a musical. He played Han Solo and Darth Vader. He did Ratatouille musical.
In some project somewhere. But yeah, he the only reason I know his name is because there was a lot of talk about him being a real teenager, and he was a real high schooler when he did his run in the Broadway production of Dear Evan Hansen. So it's pretty cool.
Good for him. Yeah.
There's some good videos if you're curious about the voice. You can definitely YouTube some of his singing, and he's really talented. But he's very young, so he can only kind of evolve from here. So
yeah, it almost made he probably would have been a better fit than Platt to be in the Dear Evan Hansen movie. Now that we talked about it, because they had to de-age him a little bit, or make him look younger. But regardless, yeah, a lot. Yeah. That's another conversation we had roughly about a year and a half ago. But yeah, no hard feelings. I enjoyed that one. I saw Renfield. It's on Peacock right now. The movie with Nicolas Cage and Nicholas Hoult, about Nicolas Cage being a Dracula and a vampire, and Nicholas Hoult playing Renfield, his servant, and his wanting to get out of it. Movie sucks. It's just no place saying it. It's not great.
I haven't heard too many good things about it.
Didn't look good.
No, the
it
premise
didn't look great.
The premise. Honestly, I'll tell you what. Nicolas Cage as Dracula, though, he nailed it. His performance was great. Outside of that, though, the rest of the story and the movie was shit. So it's just plain and simple. And I was expecting a little bit more, but it just didn't work. Honestly, I was checked out in the first 10 minutes, and I was like, "This ain't gonna be good, guys. This ain't going." I did. Yeah, I was curious. Yeah,
that's good. Commit. Follow through.
Yeah. It's only
if you're gonna have an opinion on the whole piece.
You're right.
Exactly. It was only 90 minutes. I couldn't whatever.
Right.
But it wasn't great. Nicolas Cage, he can keep doing what he's doing. If you're curious at all, he definitely gives a performance. It's something worth. It's a memorable performance as usual. And the last thing that I saw that I said I'll talk about when I saw you guys next was Secret Invasion.
You finished it, right?
I finished it. The finale, as the time of recording, was yesterday, and I watched it. And wow, did they miss the ball?
Miss the ball that bad?
They did the things, but it didn't mean anything. Like I said, like I was raving about the first 2 episodes a couple episodes back. Like the first 2 episodes of Secret Invasion, I really enjoyed. It was gripping. It was some pretty decent writing. And then after the last 4, it's like, what happened, guys? What are we doing here? And we're doing the things that you expect this show to do, and then it's like, okay, we did this, and like, okay, great, but that didn't mean anything. It didn't hold any weight. It didn't make me feel anything. You just did it. I can't give you a consolation prize because you did it. It needs to have some weight to it, and it just didn't. It didn't work at all. The finale was more confusing than anything, and as there were some aspects that I liked about the finale, but at the end of the day, it just I left that show asking more questions about the MCU. As I don't want it to deter anyone from watching it, especially if you're a Marvel fan. It definitely gives a lot of context, and a lot of things happen in it. There's characters that died. There were big moments in the MCU that makes you want to go back and watch other things, especially with the Secret Invasion premise. Now that you know a few things, maybe you want to go back and watch some of the older movies to see where all that connects. And there's something there. And I think the best thing about the show is the focus on Nick Fury. Samuel Jackson did some great performances in that show. And they did one particular storyline that I really did not see coming, which I believe was the heart of the show, that I really did enjoy. I don't want to give it away for those of you to know, because it was a surprise to me that it was kind of a big through line throughout the season when they kind of released it in the 2nd episode, I believe, this particular storyline. And I think it's going to continue in the Marvels, because that's the next time we see him. And we do know that Secret Invasion happens before the Marvels. So it's Secret Invasion, and then what follows after is the Marvels, and we know that Nick Fury's in it. So I think that particular story is going to continue through. So if you definitely want to get a little bit more knowledge going into the Marvels, I definitely recommend watch Secret Invasion. But aside from those little moments, we're probably looking at about a 30% what I liked about this, and then the other 70 is what are we doing? I don't know what's going on here. And again, I just left asking more questions than I did answers going in there. And I was really excited about this show. It just feels like wasted potential. They had such a talented cast. It was acted really well. They were just given a shitty script. And not a great premise.
Well,
so
you're not really selling it to see this show too well. It's like, I don't want you should not see it, but don't see it. Like it's not great. Don't not see it, but know that it's trash.
I guess what I'm saying. Go ahead.
I can't speak on it because I haven't seen it, but I hear what Matt's saying. If you're really, really into Marvel, you want to keep up with things, you want to follow what's going on, seems like something you might need to watch or should watch, because it has Nick Fury and it has maybe some things that are going to lead into other things. But I haven't heard any buzz really about it. Everyone that I know that's watched it is just it's not great. And the trailer kind of sold me. I think on the last podcast that I was on with you guys, I was like, Secret Invasion looks cool. I'm kind of out on Marvel. I just think that the quality has just dramatically dipped. Mm-hmm. But the trailer pulled me in. I was like, yes. And then I just never felt compelled to watch it because it just didn't seem essential, I guess.
Yeah, and I would say if you do go in, if anyone just goes in and watches it, all I recommend is just lower your expectations of what this is. This is not Secret Invasion at all. This is the MCU's version of a Secret Invasion that happens to share the same title as the very popular comic book series. Mm-hmm. It's like we see hints of it. I see what you're doing. Yeah, Ernesto, they do have a Super Skrull in it. So there's that if you're interested into that. Essentially this is the show that introduces
you said they
Super
had,
Skrulls
they had a
into the
Super
mix.
Skrull?
it introduces the fact that a Super Skrull is possible, and we do see a Super
just
Skrull.
one singular one. So then it's definitely not Secret Invasion, because like at the end there, it's Secret Invasion. It's like a blowout war of like Super Skrulls and heroes. Well,
yeah, I don't. We're not there. We could get there,
but this show was supposed to be there.
Right. It's not. Which honestly, I don't even know if the Marvels is teeing up for that. That's what I don't know. Again, I have more questions leaving the series than I do walking out of it. I should be excited. It's like, oh, I can't wait for this to happen here. And it does feel like I was reading an article saying that the Marvels is a sequel to 5 different MCU properties. It's a sequel. It's a sequel to Captain Marvel, Endgame, Miss Marvel, WandaVision, and Secret Invasion.
Okay.
So there's that to consider going into the next movie of like if there's any movie that's relying on its past Disney Plus shows, it's going to be this one, because we're taking 3 stories from Disney Plus into this movie.
That does not make me excited. So maybe they need to. It almost sounds like they need to switch directions. Like maybe not so much of this like continued storyline, but like you need to end shit. Like maybe not extend it out so far. Like maybe condense it a little bit, because it just like the fact that you told me that just tells me like they're just that it was probably slow and it probably dragged a little bit. It just seems like they overstretched out the Secret Invasion storyline. And this is just my assumption based off what you said and what I've heard from other people.
Yeah.
And I don't feel too confident going to go watch this anytime soon.
Like I said, I think just lower your expectations. And the fact that the writers and the actors strike is going on, there's a good chance that the Marvels, as well as Dune 2 and The Color Purple and Wonka and Aquaman 2, a lot of the movies that are going to be slated for a big winter release, are most likely going to get pushed back. And so with that being said, Ernesto, you might have plenty of times to consider watching Secret Invasion because the Marvels might not be coming out in November as previously slated for. So yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I don't want to deter anyone from watching the next Marvel movie or the next Marvel anything, because I'm already in the bag for it. I'm going to watch it regardless if it's crap or not. To Brian's point, I want to have an opinion on it by the end of the day, and I'm already invested into this story. I'm going to keep up with it because I like it. It's interesting to me. It's superheroes. It's what I like. So I'm going to watch it regardless. But so far, the latest bouts have not been great.
That's unfortunate.
Speaking to Ernesto's point, I think that's a huge part of why the projects haven't been as successful, is that there's just way too much trying to seed for the next thing and keep up that connective tissue, which is fun, and that obviously worked for them in the past. But they also wrapped 95% of those threads up with Endgame. Yeah. And I just don't know how many projects I can keep watching that don't feel like a complete thought or story in and of itself. And I mean, I haven't seen Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, which I know you guys both really liked. But I'm looking forward to that. But that feels like that kind of holdover from the previous era, where it's like, this is going to be a complete story. Like, it might have a tease or two, but that's not going to be the whole movie selling you on something you might not see for 5 years.
Right. Yeah, very true. That is very much a holdover from the old way of doing it. So yeah. So anyway, that's all we've been watching. So with that, we're going to be diving into our spoiler review of Oppenheimer, which is the movie we all came together to go watch. So Brian, we'll start with you. Your thoughts on Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer.
Guys, he did it. This movie is pretty astonishing. There was a few moments through the first probably 2 hours of the movie where I was like, is this the best movie I've ever seen? Like, it could be. And then, of course, like in hindsight, you kind of come down from that a little bit, and you can kind of like interrogate it a little bit more and kind of see the things that maybe don't work or the things that you're not sure about, but will maybe come back around on repeat viewings. But I don't even really know what to say about it. Like, I feel like the movie kind of speaks for itself. Like, it's a lot of talking, which is going to turn people off, and it's very long, but I didn't necessarily feel that the length was a problem. You just kind of have to know going into it that that's what it is. Like, it's 3 hours. If you watch it at home and you need to like watch an hour and a half and then take a break and then like come back to it, I don't think that's the ideal way to watch it, but like you still might get something out of it. But I mean, it's like such a powerful statement on just the power of like seeing movies in a cinema. I mean, it's literally people in rooms talking for 80% of the movie, and it is riveting. It is riveting. And the performances are so good. Some of the best performances, I think, that have been in any Nolan film. For me, I really like Nolan. His movies are always interesting and always like aiming for something. He gets a lot of flack, I feel like, sometimes for just being very self-serious and, you know, sometimes his exposition and like the time shifting approach to a lot of his storytelling doesn't work for everyone. And I can see all of those criticisms. I thought the time shifting worked really well in this movie. Totally worked for me. Totally made the screenplay feel like a magic trick, honestly. I was like, oh, okay. There's been some discussion about the third hour, which I'm sure we'll get to when you guys kind of go into your thoughts. Seems like it's a little divisive because kind of after the Trinity test, it kind of comes down and it kind of feels like a big exhale. I think it worked for me. I was definitely like, oh, okay, this is what we're doing. This is where we're going. This is how we're going to wrap this up. And I feel like I would come back around and maybe appreciate that third hour more on a second viewing or, you know, after repeat viewings. But man, just the sound design blew me away. Obviously, as I mentioned in our introduction, that we got to see this in IMAX. So the sound was there, the visuals were there. And that just kind of immerses you in the experience. But I was blown away by it. It's literally just scenes of great actors talking to each other. And that's like the movie's like greatest achievement. Like I was never bored. I was never bored during this movie. For me, I think it's Nolan's best work overall, for sure. There's a few of his movies I haven't seen or haven't seen all the way through. Like I admittedly have not seen Dunkirk at all. Just haven't seen it. Just one of those things that I was having kids and I you know, some people feel that that's his best work or was at least until this because it's not in that comic book realm and it doesn't have those sci-fi elements. It's more history based and that works some better for some people. But yeah, for me, the last time I remember sitting watching a movie and being like, is this the best movie I've ever seen was watching Dune in 2021. So I mean, there's been lots of good stuff since then. And, you know, and I think a lot of it has to do with that theater experience that kind of engulfs you and kind of takes you over. And then in hindsight, you're like, oh, I get it. Like, it is just a movie. But in the moment, you're just like, wow, like, I can't believe he pulled this off. Like, I don't know. It kind of left me speechless because I didn't know that much about this story really at all. And from what I understand, it's allegedly got a lot of, you know, it's very accurate historically. It's based on like a really fat biography of Oppenheimer called American Prometheus. I have no knowledge of that book, but it's like a 700-page kind of doorstop, very dense, lots of history that Nolan was inspired, you know, by that book to make the film. And I don't know. It left me thinking about the movie for days afterwards. You know, the moral questions and the ideas in it and some of the imagery. Yeah, it was quite an experience. Very, very memorable movie-going experience. So for me, 5 stars. Loved it.
Ernesto.
Yeah, I'm there with you. I mean, I couldn't speak any. Like you put it beautifully. Like I, I think I would have to go back and rewatch The Dark Knight for me to truly say if it's better. But it's enough where I think that I have to watch it again just to truly really answer that question. I mean, it was just so good, like you said, the sound design. I mean, the production design. How faithful he was, like that he barely used. I don't know, what did they say? He used zero CGI or barely any. But it was great. I love the intentional use of sound, the absence of sound. Like, how crazy is it? It's like when we're looking at the explosion and the entire theater is silent. Like, to me, like that's where I would expect like the huge roar to come, but it wasn't until afterwards. And I think that was more of like him trying to bring us into his perspective of what he experienced during the Trinity test. And I mean, the fact that we didn't see the bombing of Japan. I think I was listening to Brandon, a friend of ours who's come on the show before, Brandon. He did a video review and he brought that up a point. It's like, well, you know, if we really wanted to get into Oppenheimer's head, we could see it to really understand the gravity of his decisions was to make that bomb and what it feels to really deal with that. But now as I'm thinking it out loud, it almost like we're truly in his perspective because this is all he saw. All he saw was the test and the knowledge of Nagasaki and Hiroshima being bombed, but he wasn't there to actually see it. He just had to go through the mental anguish of imagining what those people went through and what they are going through over there. So I think that was, I don't know. I think now thinking out loud, I think that stylistically, I kind of agree with Nolan in not showing us what happened over there. But I can understand the argument for the other side as well. I like that. I love that. Like it's not just about the bomb. It's as we were talking about after the movie. It focuses on his legacy leading up to the Trinity test and following with the hearing to get his security clearance removed and the swearing, the confirmation of Levi Strauss, and just how all those things are intertwined in everything that happened. I mean, I loved it. I mean, when he's giving the speech about when they give the bombing, and then you kind of see, like, you kind of get in his head where everything goes white, like almost you can see him going through his anxiety attack, and then he's staring at people laughing, he's staring at people crying, people throwing up, and like everything went white, and like you can see like the paper ripping off people's faces as like they were bombed as well. I would go see it again. Like, I think the movie was incredible. Like, I think it deserves a second viewing, but like you said, it's not for everybody. Not everybody wants to see a movie where you have to sit down and watch people talk for 3 hours. They would probably expect it to see more action involved, especially walking into a Nolan film, given the films that he has done.
Yeah, and you made a point about the plastic coming off her face.
It was like it almost looked like paper, like layers of skin coming off.
Yeah, paper. Yeah, that was Nolan's.
Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I did see something about that.
But yeah, I kind of share the same sentiment with the both of you. Maybe a little bit lesser to the degree of the fact that I really, really liked the movie. I didn't 100% love the movie, but also it was a different Nolan movie than I was expecting. I was walking in thinking that we were going to get an intense lead up to the Trinity Project, and that was going to be the 3 hours, and kind of in a way, like I wasn't expecting the action that came from like Inception, but I was expecting more the intensity of, say, Interstellar. That shared a little bit less action, but more like of a spectacle even. And then when really an hour and a half, and you start to realize, okay, wait a minute, I'm not seeing the spectacle part. It's just a lot of people still sitting and talking, and eventually I came to appreciate that. because I think eventually I came to settle into the fact that this is what the movie was, and this is what the movie I need to now start watching instead of the movie that I was expecting to watch when I went into it. But it's you got to keep up with it. It's throwing a lot at you that you really have to pay attention to.
It's most definitely a pay attention movie. I mean, just even the significance of like Florence Pugh's character, who I think she was phenomenal. I think she played a great role, but like it may seem insignificant in the grand scheme, like to the fact that he had this mistress who's on the side, but it's significant because of how he dealt with her death afterwards. Bless you. And like she committed suicide because he made a promise. So he did something, and then the effect of that was he's causing death. And like you could tell like that weighing on him, and plus the Trinity Project, like he's a scientist, so he sees correlation in the things that he's doing. So I think as a small insignificant part, I think in the grand scheme of what was going through his head at that moment, it was significant to the movie.
I totally agree with that. And even going back to Florence's Pugh character, you make a really good point there, is that I was watching a video and it was apparently the headlines are ambiguous of what actually happened related to her death. A lot of people assumed that it was a suicide, but there were rumors going around that people went to their house to assassinate her. So Oppenheimer can stay focused on the Manhattan Project. And so there were a lot of like rumors around that was kind of surrounding that, at least according to the video that I saw. And apparently there was a quick shot in the film of like a black hand dunking her face into the bath water. But it was very quick. It was almost a blink and you might have missed it type of situation. But it showed both the likely scenario of both that could happen or her committing suicide. And you see Oppenheimer at that moment, like when you see through Oppenheimer's perspective of either she being assassinated or her committing suicide, him like kind of reacting to the news that he heard, and then with his wife Emily Blunt being like, "Get yourself together. I don't care about your mistress or your past. People depend on you to be the person that you are. So get your ass up and get back to work," type of an attitude about it. Which I find interesting. And it's funny because even going back to the hearing with Emily Blunt, and also that kind of visceral scene that he is in the hearing, and then you just like the camera pans and it kind of goes around, I think, Jason Clarke's character, and all of a sudden you see Oppenheimer naked, and the next shot is him having sex with his mistress, and you just see Emily Blunt staring at him, like kind of envisioning that in her head as he's describing the scenes or those events to the hearing, and you can see that she was upset about it. It was like, well, but you knew about this. She's like, yeah, but now it's on record, and that's like you're kind of opening up a whole new can of worms again. I thought that was a pretty powerful scene. Just looking at that visually, it was pretty astonishing. It was pretty like, eye-catching, more or less.
Yeah. Did you guys feel like? I love Emily Blunt as an actress. This is not anything against her. I think she did a phenomenal job with what she was given, but I just feel like she was kind of underserved by this movie. Like she wasn't really given anything to do, and I'm sure that it was appealing to get a call like, "Hey, do you want to be in this Chris Nolan movie? Like, it's going to be a good one." And she, on the press circuit, they seemed, at least until the strike, they seemed like they were all having a really good time. I mean, it's her and Matt Damon and Robert Downey Jr. all giving interviews and joking and having fun and all of that. But this is not necessarily something I agree with or even can really speak to, but I have seen that throughout Nolan's career, that's kind of been a huge criticism of him, is that he doesn't always serve female characters well, and that they're always sort of in service to like the man's story, which in this case is very true. I don't know how much of the wife's perspective or of her, place in the story is incorporated into the book. So I don't know if, that's just a product of it being 3 hours and, there just wasn't enough time to devote to their marriage and their relationship and really fleshing her out as a character. But I was mildly disappointed that she just wasn't like a larger presence in the movie, and that I didn't really feel like I understood her relationship with Oppenheimer and like how they fell in they fell in love very quickly in the movie. Like they kind of just show them, oh, they're courting each other and then they're married. And I understand you're going to skip over things, but I just feel like if you're going to cast an actress like that, make the role worth it. That's kind of one of the only real criticisms I have of the overall structure and the use of the different people in the movie. Because, I mean, you have Gary Oldman showing up for a 5-minute scene as Harry Truman, which I did not expect, and I was delighted by, and he was tremendous. But that's all that needed to be. You know, we didn't need more from him. But from her, I just feel like in the writing and the telling of the story that there definitely could have been more there. Especially if it already is 3 hours, like we should have felt a little bit more, and I should have understood their connection a little, and their marriage, and their dynamic of their relationship. I mean, they have children together. Like, I really did want more there. I felt like she was underserved, so I was a little disappointed. But Emily Blunt, tremendous actress, no issue with her as a performer. I don't think that was the best use of her in the movie.
I can see that. But I think that was the point of her character, because she was just there to I mean, maybe that's what it was like for Oppenheimer's wife. Like, she was only there at the most important times because she couldn't be in there building the bomb. She had to support the family at home, and I guess it wasn't really about his family life. But we do get some key moments with her, like Matt was just saying, that moment in the security hearing. Also at the very end, I think was another really great moment at the very end of the film when Oppenheimer's receiving his plaque or his medal, when Teller is there and he shakes his hand, and then like Emily Blunt like staunchly is like, no, just gives him the death stare, like completely. Like, I don't like, to me it was small, but it was significant just to show her support for Oppenheimer. I don't know, like, to me it was a nice addition. But I can see what you're saying. Like, there wasn't really she didn't really have anything to seek out or do. Like, she was just there in support of him.
Yeah, I'm more very similar. I'm kind of with both of you. I'm kind of split the line here, because Emily Blunt did have, aside from the two moments that Ernesto talked about, another one that comes to mind is when she's on the stand, more or less, at this hearing, and they were worried about whether or not she can handle some of the questions that are going to be thrown her way, and she just ripped that guy a new one with like her fiery responses. And to your point, Brian, that was the first time that I felt like, okay, we are leading to Emily Blunt's character. This is her moment right now, because the rest of the movie was Oppenheimer's, like, time to shine. This is Emily Blunt's time to shine. It was very brief, very, very brief, but I felt like that was like her shining moment in the movie, of kind of standing up to herself, when the entire movie she was telling Oppenheimer to stand up for himself, and he wasn't doing it, especially when it was pertaining to the hearing. See, she felt like that they were just walking all over him, and she always kept telling him, like, you got to stand up for yourself, you got to do this, and she was the person to do that for herself. So I feel like that was a good character moment for her, as well as not shaking Teller's hand at the very end. Whereas, like, and even when Einstein was telling him they're going to give you medals, but it's not for you, it's for them to make themselves feel good on your accomplishments that you did, even though you feel like shit about it. And so, but even with that, this whole movie is about guilt. Like, we were just seeing him feel guilty about what he's done. Like, this, he never felt right building this. He just felt like that as a scientist, this is a probability that it could be made, whether or not, and we saw this throughout the movie, whether or not it should be made. But I think him as a scientist, and he was a physicist as well, I believe. He needed to know the answer, and then he got his answer. But then he didn't like his answer either, and then he kind of lived with that for kind of the rest of his days afterward. Because even to Ernesto, you pointed out the when they actually did the initial bombing in Japan, and we were just like, we never saw it, and I did see the same criticism online, was that if you really wanted to showcase some of the horrors, you should have shown it. But this was all through Oppenheimer's perspective. He wasn't there. But I think that scene of him in the auditorium, honestly, I think that was one of the highlights of the movie. Of we got to really be in his mind, where the crowd's cheering these these roaring accomplishments that he was able to do, and all he's thinking about is the dead thousands of dead bodies that his creation had done. Like the roaring sound, the feet feet stomping in the auditorium. It was all kind of like a and we kind of saw that, even we heard those sounds earlier in the movie as well, and then we kind of came back to this moment, him like just seeing things like people just getting exploded. He stepped on ash, like a corpse body, as well. We see people like making out under the bleachers, and then the justification of like people crying underneath in the bleachers, of like just how people are kind of reacting to this thing, like either go America, and then he's like, no guys, no, you guys don't understand what we did here. Even his concern when he saw the bomb leaving, it was like, hey, so what are you going to do about it? And Matt Damon, he was like, you don't worry about what we're going to do about it. Your job is done here, but also you can't leave because we might need you to do more. So, like, yeah, to me, I think that was kind of crazy. And I go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, I think those are definitely some of the strengths of the movie. It's just like dealing with the complexity of those moral questions, and obviously his perspective. I've seen some interesting criticism of the movie that some people feel that it lionizes him and glorifies him and makes him into this hero, but that's not really what I took away from it at all.
I didn't. No, not at all.
I feel like it's very complicated, and he's filled with a lot of doubt, and obviously he came at it from a scientific perspective, and the pressure to like serve his country, but they don't ever really show him feeling great about it. But then he follows through with it, but also there was a whole team of people involved. So I'm not sure that like he does get the credit, and he is known as the godfather of the atomic bomb, but it's not. I just don't know that you can. I don't know. The movie doesn't really show that it was all on his shoulders. He was leading a group of people to more or less solve it like a puzzle. At least that's how it's presented in the movie. It's like, well, what if we do this? Okay, this could happen. It's all theorized until they start putting things into practice. And I feel like it was very good at showing that aspect of it, where it was like, it wasn't just like they were like, Eureka, we have the bomb. Like, it was a very complicated process, and there were multiple people involved. And I didn't walk away thinking that he was a hero or a villain necessarily, just that he was serving at a time and place in history that he couldn't have anticipated, and he's going to be remembered for that forever. But that's not necessarily fair or right, but then it's also like he did do it, and he did follow through with it, and he did give us something that we can't really put the genie back in the bottle. So I feel like for me, I didn't have that experience. I did not walk away feeling like, oh, he's vindicated now because Nolan made a movie about him and he's the hero. So that to me is a very strange reading of the movie. But I don't know, maybe I would see more of that if I saw it again and looked at it through that lens. Speaking about seeing it again, I do think that this is going to be a movie that is only going to grow in people's estimation over time. I think as more people are able to watch it at home and kind of endure the 3-hour length, I don't know how it will play in that context, but I do think because it is people in rooms talking, that it's going to be one of those movies that in 20 years, people would just be like, damn, what a movie. Like, I don't see this movie kind of fading into obscurity or, I think it's going to be something that people revisit periodically over time, and it's only going to grow in people's estimation what it achieves. I don't know. I definitely see some of the criticisms, and I definitely don't think it's a perfect movie by any means. But in terms of what we're delivered in cinema today, I mean, it doesn't get any better, honestly. Like, I just don't know what else. I mean, for me, this is like what I'm looking for in going to a movie and having that experience. I have had tons of fun seeing Marvel movies or superhero movies or comedies or other things, but it's just like this kind of just like this movie has a point of view. You know, Nolan took what he took out of the book, and that's the movie that he made. He's not telling you that this is exactly how it happened or that this is what everyone should think about this person or this period of history. It's here's how I see it. Here's how I want to present it visually, and you know what parts of the story I want to highlight. And I loved it. I can't wait to watch it again. I think it's going to hold up, and I do think people will be talking about it and kind of revisiting it in 5, 10, 15 years. They'll be like, man, was I wrong? Or they'll be debating that last hour, because it's definitely a different turn that the movie takes for that last hour. I'm not 100% sure that it works. I was with it until the end, and then when it was over, I was like, you know, the last hour is going to take some thought. I'm going to have to go back and watch that again to really see if I feel that it works with the other 2 hours, because it kind of feels like a whole different movie at that point. If that makes sense.
It's funny that you mentioned the last hour, because I didn't really feel that the last hour was any different from the rest of the movie, because we were getting snippets of what was actually going on. Honestly, the last hour of the movie was more of a, oh, this is what's happening. Like, this is the reason why we're in this, because I didn't understand what was going on in those scenes, and why was he doing this hearing and it's not in court? Why is Robbie Downey Jr. over here in black and white doing his thing? I didn't pick up on what was going on. So the last hour kind of gave me some like, it was like the light bulb just went on my head. It's like, oh, this is what's going on. This is what the scenes we were seeing in the movie. So like, to me, I didn't have an issue with the last hour. I was more surprised that we didn't end with the Trinity Project. Mm-hmm. We that was a 2-hour mark of the movie. Like you're technically your climax was 2 hours in. The last hour of the movie was your epilogue, more so your falling action into your, like, this is the outcome of the build up to all of this. So I was perfectly fine with it. It kind of went like a 3-act structure based on the hour, more or less. And so I had zero problems with that. To me, it was just more of like, again, I was walking into a Nolan movie, and I didn't really quite get the Nolan fashion and spectacle that I was expecting. This is again, I see this as an actor showcase. It was more about, you know, what stood out a lot more was how like great Cillian Murphy was as Oppenheimer. It was like mesmerizing. Even equally as memorizing was Robbie Downey Jr.'s character, which I was like, man, if this guy doesn't get an Oscar nom for Best Supporting Actor as well as win, this is the role that he can get, so we can give him an Oscar for Iron Man. Like this is what he needed to do. And like, to me, he was amazing. He was great in this movie. Matt Damon, amazing. Matt Damon as the Colonel. I'm not sure exactly what he was. Basically, like the face of the government for us. And I was like, he came in there with grit and sass, and I was 100% on board. Even Florence Pugh did a great job in her role. And like, so you're talking about like Emily Blunt not having much to do, but also serving to Oppenheimer. I feel like to the same point, Florence Pugh was also serving to Oppenheimer's character, but she did it in a much memorable way. I guess I think she was able to do a little bit more in those scenes, as well as, you know, I was not expecting nudity in this movie at all, and the fact that there was not one but a few scenes of that nature, I was like, wow, like this is very adult of you, Christopher Nolan. Again, a movie that I was not expecting for him to be. Almost like the spectacle that I was anticipating came within the actors and their performances, not with the set pieces that I've seen from Nolan in the past. And with that, like the only real spectacle in this movie, like visually, as far as like what I would expect, was the actual bombing, the leading up to it, like seeing that take place. The fact that wasn't visual effects, get out of here, man. Are you serious? Like you let a bomb loose out, Nolan. And I felt like he did very creative ways to get that practically. And also just in general, there's and the reason why I think we all wanted to see this movie in IMAX, or this is the demanding of a movie viewing experience or a theater movie experience, is the fact that this man spent a lot of time and energy perfecting the cinematic experience. Like when I think when the audience realizes that there is time and energy put into a movie to do things practically, to do things with IMAX cameras, to pick the right people, to build out these sets, it's like people recognize that, as opposed to, say, like a Marvel movie where we know most of that is being done behind the void or a green screen, where it just doesn't hit the same as then that we're actually seeing tangible, real things that the actors can play with. It also helps the actors do a better performance if they're actually in a real environment. So all of the camera tricks, the acting, it's all worked together really well for Nolan to put out. I wouldn't necessarily call it his best movie. I feel like, for me, like The Dark Knight is really up there. We know we briefly talked about Inception when we finished watching Oppenheimer, and you said it diluted for you a little bit, but I still really enjoyed the movie. Upon second viewing and third viewings, I grew to really appreciate Interstellar, and I've always loved The Prestige. That was a fantastic movie through and through. So like it's kind of like fighting against Nolan's great work. It's like, here's this great movie, kind of mashed in with other of his great movies, and trying to where does that fit into all of it? I feel like so far a lot of his movies are dealing to different audiences, and this one here, in my opinion, is dealing to the Academy, because this movie's going right into the Oscar season for sure, with production design, sound design, score. Ludwig Göransson did an amazing score for this movie. A lot of actors are going to be nominated for this film as well. He's probably going to come out with Best Director in it as well. I think this is the movie that Nolan's been waiting for to get the Oscars' attention. And I made this comment last week's episode when we reviewed Barbie, and we kind of gave a little bit of tease for Oppenheimer, but I'll say it here again. This is very much like Steven Spielberg, in the way that Steven Spielberg made Jaws. Those movies that are very entertaining, and a lot of people find a lot of enjoyment out of it. And then he made Schindler's List. And Schindler's List is not anything he's ever done with the other films he had prior. So I feel like, in my way, this is Nolan's Schindler's List.
I agree with you. So, a couple things. So, I really enjoyed Robert Downey Jr. 100%. I see him being nominated for his performance. And I think you said Cillian Murphy, and it's I do believe it's Cillian. I do believe that it's Cillian Murphy. It's okay,
my bad.
That's what we're here for, man.
It's okay. Yes. Matt usually, pronounces things perfectly, so it's good.
Yeah, all the time. But that's okay, but that's why we're here for, because I fuck shit up too. So we just help each other.
Yes. That's right.
But yeah, I mean, the whole dynamic between Strauss and Oppenheimer was just was so great, and then all stemming from that moment, from what he thought was happening, and it's not even everything that happened wasn't even anything. It was all in his head. He completely fabricated everything that happened and took all that and tried to take all that away from him. Actually did take that away from him. And I think they showcased, I forgot that Robert Downey Jr. was acting. I felt like he became that person.
Mm-hmm.
Just the acting was just so phenomenal. I don't know how much more. This 10 out of 10 for me. I can't. This is up there to be probably my favorite movie this year.
Really?
Downey was excellent. It was so refreshing to see him. I mean, he was obviously perfect for Tony Stark, did a great job, but he was kind of in the Marvel machine for a very long time, and just to see him kind of getting back to showing us what he could do. I mean, he's always been one of our best actors, but this is just a perfect kind of role for him to, and he doesn't use any of his typical kind of snarky, it was very against what I would consider a classic Robert Downey Jr. performance. He definitely, a lot of his tics and things that are kind of he's known for, I feel like he kind of held those at bay for this performance. And I think that was a lot to do with Nolan being like, I saw a few interviews and clips of him being like, Nolan was like, those things that have served you well as an actor, you're going to not rely on those and find new resources to dig into this character. I think it was a very successful performance. He's so good in the movie. So is Cillian Murphy. But the performances are amazing. And honestly, Nolan isn't really known for being a writer. Like, he writes screenplays, but I wouldn't say like what a great screenplay necessarily. But I think this is definitely one of his best work as a screenwriter. And I know that a lot of the cast has commented on how there were parts of it that are written in first person, so that it really puts you in that, when you're reading it, it puts you in that first person of Oppenheimer's experience and thoughts. And I think that's just really interesting. I'd love to see if they publish the screenplay, as I know they have with many of his screenplays. And some of those bigger name filmmakers, they will put out like, you know, the shooting script or whatever, final draft, and then you can actually read on the page like what the actors had to work with. And I'd be interested to see that for this, because it's pretty much all dialogue. It's all talking. But I think screenwriting structurally and just the dialogue, the way that it worked, some of Nolan's best work, absolutely, as a screenwriter, for sure. For me, in my view.
I agree with that. I think as far as a screenwriter is concerned, this is definitely Nolan's best work as far as a screenwriter. And even, I mean, arguably as a director, like, I think he crafted one hell of a movie to, like, again, he doesn't really, I feel like, rely solely on actors' performances to get the message across, especially like with movies like Inception and Interstellar. I mean, the actors are definitely, you know, a pivotal role in the film, but you remember more of the spectacle that is those movies rather than certain performances. I feel like I remember more in this movie the performances of the actors more than the spectacle, because the movie is the actors. The movie is that. I think you made a really good point about Robbie Downey Jr., of him being in the Marvel machine for so long. I think a lot of people kind of, you know, it's hard. You can even go back to, say, like Harry Potter, and Daniel Radcliffe was Harry Potter for so long, that how does an actor get out of that role to do other things? And I feel like Daniel Radcliffe did a really good job of, like, I'm no longer Harry Potter. Look at all these other movies I've done. Like, he's definitely cemented himself as an actor other than Harry Potter. And Robbie Downey Jr. was already acting, obviously, before Iron Man, but then he really, you know, became popular for Iron Man, and then you almost forget that he did other things before that. And I think Oppenheimer is a great reminder of what the acting abilities Robbie Downey Jr. is able to do under the hands of a visionary director like Nolan, and like what he was able to get out of Robbie Downey Jr. And I'm telling this, that's an Oscar-worthy performance. Like, I'm calling it now. He's probably going to win Best Supporting Actor.
We got half a year left, Matthew.
I know, but
bold prediction. But I agree with you. I definitely see him being in the conversation for sure.
And the same for Cillian Murphy. I think he's definitely a shoo-in. He's definitely a shoo-in for lead actor in a film as well. It kind of very similar to how, like, you know, Elvis came out last July and it made its way all the way through the award season, and he was nominated. He didn't win. Brendan Fraser won that role. Very, very well-deserved win for Brendan Fraser for that. But like, Elvis came out in the summer, and it was able to hold over all the way to the award season next year. And I feel like Cillian Murphy's performance will do the same, and a lot of this movie will do the same. It's not gonna. I mean, I think he's been a lot of Nolan films in the past. With the Dark Knight trilogy, Inception, to name a few. I'm not sure if he was in Interstellar or not. I don't remember if he was. I think he was. But I think, like, he's been in Nolan movies to prep himself for this role. Like, he did an amazing job as the lead, and it was just so captivating. All of the performances were just captivating. Like, I was immersed into this world. Also, some of the angles that they chose to kind of bring you in. Again, it's very dialogue heavy, but, you know, I think as much of Nolan films, you almost, like, you can't stop at one. You have to watch it again in order to really appreciate what the movie's trying to tell you. And there's not a lot of, well, a few things. There's not a lot of movies that demand a second viewing. I feel like a lot of almost all of Nolan movies demand that second viewing, as well as deserves the second viewing for the amount of artistry that he was able to put in it that you probably are not going to get the first go around.
For sure.
Even talking about its success right now, this is the highest the highest grossing Nolan film that wasn't Batman. It opened to $80 million domestically, which was $30 million more than it was projected to make. It also made $174 million worldwide. And for a movie that's 3 hours long, I think it definitely shows that with the help of the Barbenheimer marketing around it, I think it also just shows that people are willing. Like the Barbenheimer is not the only reason why this movie was successful. The people, it definitely it helped for sure. But I think it just goes to show that even kind of looking at Barbenheimer as a whole, like it fueled the fourth biggest box office weekend in history. That's crazy to think about. That is probably one of the biggest box office weekends in years. I mean, obviously well before the pandemic. And maybe even Endgame can be in that conversation of like the last big box office weekend. But the fact that these two original-ish stories, based off of something, like obviously Barbie's based off of the doll IP, and Oppenheimer's based off the book and real events. So it's not like it's just tangible out of nowhere, but it's what these creators were able to do to these stories, which makes it engaging, and why people are, going in droves to go to the theater and watch not just one but both of these movies. It feels like it's necessary viewing because it feels like that the artists, the directors, and the creators behind these movies gave them something to watch that they've never seen before. And I think it's kind of great that, and we were talking about this on Barbenheimer Part 1, Ernesto, that, it's great to see people going to the movies again.
It was such a nice feeling. So many people sitting outside and talking, like doing the same thing. I mean, we sat outside for almost 45 minutes and just sat and just kind of gave our quick thoughts about the movie and just went into different actors. And it was fun. And there were so many different little pods of that to see different people dressed up. It just, the marketing team for both of these films, whether they came together or social media did it organically, like they definitely amplified it and made it work. They made movies an event going, made it cool to go back to the movies. Because if it hadn't been for the marketing, we probably would have gotten like maybe half of what these movies made.
Yeah, that's a really good point. But with that, Brian, we'll start with you. Your final thoughts on the film.
Just great to have a good cinematic experience. Great to be able to go to a movie with friends that does feel like an event. It was especially fun for me. The first year that I met Ernesto was back during our college program in 2008, which was the summer that The Dark Knight was released. Mm-hmm. And I lost track of how many times we went to the theater to see that movie. At least 5 that I can remember.
We literally had a Batman day.
I think I saw it 12 times maybe over the life of its, being in theater. So of course it's always fun to reminisce about that. And Nolan has that with his name and the sort of brand that he has as a filmmaker, being almost a populist filmmaker with higher artistic ambition and craft. It just, that's half the reason that this movie is what it is and why it's both bringing people in, why it's making money, why people are actually giving it positive reviews. Like I said, not a perfect movie necessarily. I if we really wanted to pick certain things apart, we could, but overall, absolutely phenomenal cast, phenomenal script, just beautiful, beautiful imagery, stunning cinematography. And for me, this is Nolan's masterwork. I think it's his best film overall. Are there more enjoyable or more entertaining films of his? Like I said, I have a lot of memories with going with friends the summer of 2008 to see The Dark Knight many times. It is a movie that is near and dear to my heart, that I cherish, that I still think holds up to this day. And that would probably be for me maybe his second best movie. But Oppenheimer was a heck of a. I feel like it's going to be an all-timer. I feel like down the road it will be in the conversation for one of the best, definitely one of the best Nolan films, if not one of the best movies of all time.
Wow. Ernesto?
Yeah, all that. Obviously everything he said. Like there's not many more positive things we're going to be saying about it. This is obviously something we're going to be talking about during the Oscar season next year. It's just I think it's going to be a matter of what they're going to be nominated for, but it's well deserved. I mean, this is a biopic, and that doesn't have a lot of action in it, but it managed to, the conversation is so riveting that it's managed to hold your attention for so long. I just think it was well crafted. It was just well made. Like there's not many 3-hour movies that can get me to go see it again, and I would 100% go see this movie again. So I mean, it was an amazing movie, hands down.
Yeah, and like I said before, I mean, I think upon a second viewing, because I feel like I'm on the edge there of like I really like this movie, but I didn't love it. But I feel like upon a second viewing, I think that can change my opinion as much as like Interstellar has done in the past for me. Like I watched that movie 3 times, and in its third time, I cried in that third viewing, and I already know what was happening, but I felt like I was able to understand it more the more times I watched it. I feel like in this bout, I think if there's anything that I'll probably get from a second viewing is the really knowing more about what Oppenheimer is feeling in those moments, like really understanding the lead up to it, the actual Trinity event, the Manhattan Project, then the fallout that came with him and all the people that were kind of conspiring against him. And like I feel like that will resonate a lot more. Also knowing what the events of the movies was, but knowing myself, there's probably going to be a lot of research that I go into. I'll probably watch a couple of deep dives. I'll probably watch a couple of behind the scenes, because it's Nolan, of like, how did this movie get made? Why was this important? What was the significance of this, that, and whatever? And down the line, I know because Nolan does this to me every single time, that upon the next viewing, I'm going to get a different reaction out of it, and it's probably going to be great. And so with that, and with anything, it demands a second viewing. But on a first viewing, I really enjoyed it. Yes, it's 3 hours, but I wouldn't say it's 3 hours of just people talking. It's 3 hours of some of the best acting I've seen in a movie in a while. Like it's just amazing. It's just like, and then also, and right in like the 2 hour mark, like roughly a little over halfway, you get a big boom.
It's a big.
Who doesn't like a big boom? Like that's what you get. It's a big boom. It's fantastic. It's so, like you guys' point. It's so well crafted. And I know for sure, at least for Ernesto's and I's sake, that this isn't the last time we're talking about this movie. This is something that's going to be brought up again and again throughout the year, and as we get closer to the award season. As far as like my early predictions, as far as the award season, we're looking at Best Picture, Best Director, Best Screenplay, Best Lead Actor, Lead Actress, Supporting Actor, Supporting Actress, Sound, Production. It might get like over 10 nominations for this film. And I think Barbie is, speaking of that, I think it's also up there as far as it'll probably get some Oscar noms as well. And we talked about this last week as far as production and costume design for sure. But like overall, a fantastic movie from Nolan. I don't think it's my personal favorite from Nolan, but I think, Brian, you said it best of like, this is his masterpiece as a filmmaker. Like everything he's done in the past has been building up to this. It might not be in my head his masterpiece, but I can understand the significance of what he's done for film and what he put into this movie to recognize that this is a gorgeous film that he put on screen. And also it's fantastic that we went to go see it, as it was intended, and as every movie that Nolan makes as intended, to see it on the big screen. And we recommend every one of you to also see it on the big screen as well. So there you go. That's our spoiler review of Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer, as well as the wrapping up of part 2 of our Barbenheimer conversation. What a great time to go back to the movies to see 2 great films and just kind of be immersed into the movie-going experience, something that we've been doing for quite some time now. And like I said last week, it feels like that the world has now caught up to our love for going to the movies. even if it was just for the weekend. I feel like a lot of people kind of shared that same sentiment. I'm sure not a lot of people are jazzed up to go back to the theater anytime soon, but as every week to week, Ernesto, we're back there. We'll see the familiars. We'll see the brand news. We know who's new. We know who's there. But yeah, it was a great time to be surrounded by a lot of people wanting to go to the movies. And it was also great to see the movie with you guys. Something I haven't done in a very long time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ernesto,
Brian, you got to watch
absolutely.
The Bear.
It's either going to be hopefully, I'm about to go on vacation, so it's either going to be we might have time to do both. We might be able to have time to do both things. We'll see when I come back from vacation in 2 weeks.
Yeah, so Ernesto, with that, when we do come back, tell all of the listeners what they can look forward to when we return.
We're going to be going. I was gonna try to think. You saw it.
Yeah,
I was like,
I saw it.
I'm gonna try to be creative, but nope. I fucked it up as soon as I started. I fucked it up. We are gonna be reviewing Haunted Mansion, Disney's Haunted Mansion. This is their second attempt at a Haunted Mansion movie. I'm kind of excited for it. The cast is good. I mean, we got Danny DeVito, Jamie Lee Curtis, Lakeith Stanfield. Who else is it? Rosario Dawson.
Jared Leto.
That's right. Jared Leto is in this movie. That's right. Yeah, I'm excited for it. I think it'll be. I have some expectations. I think it'll be good.
Not to derail the conversation, because I know we're trying to wrap up the pod, but does anyone else remember when Guillermo del Toro was supposed to direct that movie starring Ryan Gosling?
No.
Yeah. So like somewhere between like the Eddie Murphy one and this iteration, it had been passed to like many different directors, and there was a minute there where it was going to be Guillermo del Toro's remake of Disney's Haunted Mansion, and at some point Ryan Gosling was attached to star. I'd have to look up like the Wikipedia history to get like all the fine details, but I'm 99% sure that it was real at one point. I don't know how long it was actually like in development, but for a minute there, it was going to happen that way.
There's a bunch of stories from 2021 and 2022 and 2020 saying that he was attached to this project. It's just, I'm not going into details. Just there's a lot of headlines confirming that. So,
wow, that's insane. Guillermo del Toro doing the Haunted Mansion. I want to see that movie. We're not, but
yeah, we're not getting that. But
we're not getting that.
Maybe if this one flops, then they'll go back to it with him.
maybe. But I actually was really hooked by the trailer. The trailer kind of convinced me that, you know what, this movie actually might be something. I was already intrigued with the lineup of, actors they were able to get into this, and I was also intrigued by I think Justin Simon, who was the director behind the movie. And so he was already sparking some interest because he's the director behind Dear White People. And so I was like, okay, all right, this could be interesting. But the trailer sold it for me. So I'm actually going in there with a little bit of higher expectations on it, because it does look really good. But we'll see when we review it when we return, Ernesto. But with that, if you want to see more from us, you can always follow us on our social media channels, on Instagram, on boxoffice_bingers, our Facebook, TikTok threads, and our YouTube channel at Box Office Bingers. For the last couple of episodes now, we've been doing some video. Ernesto's been working hard on trying to make that happen. So thank you, Ernesto, for making us go live. And you can also see our wonderful faces on our YouTube channel as well. And then also, if you're on Twitter or X or whatever it's called now, you can find us on @BoxOfficeBinger without the S. So Brian, thank you again for coming on to the show, just talking about Oppenheimer. I really do appreciate it. And hopefully we can go see another movie together again soon.
Yeah, always a pleasure. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you. We'd like to thank each and every one of you for listening to this episode and for all the episodes on all this podcast. Really do appreciate it. Just a couple of guys just talking about movies, and really appreciate kind of just joining in and just listening to us just have fun about it. Come back next time for more movie fun. You're not going to regret it. And with that, I've been your host, Matt Diaz.
See ya.